Hello, everyone, and welcome to our newest episode of Freemium Mode, the show where we talk about all things to do with video games marketing. With me today is one of the best in the team with all things to do with consumer PR. It's Jack here, and I know what you might be thinking. I know what you might be thinking with a title such as this. Max, it's over a month until Christmas. Why are we talking about Christmas now? But well, in the world of video games and video game marketing, Christmas comes early, and that's what we hope to do with you here is to give you the advice and guidance around launching your game around the most wonderful time of year. Thank you, Jack, for joining me, because as much as it is the most wonderful time of the year, it's also one of the busiest time of year when it comes to game launches.
I thought you tricked me. I was expecting some kind of Christmas present, but here we are, and there's no presents.
No,
But
no. The present is my company. That's the thing. It's a time out of our working day to talk about a topic we both love and enjoy and can speak a lot about. But yes, as the title suggested, we are going to be speaking about launching your game around Christmas. It's a very interesting topic. It's quite nuanced, and we've hopefully given you some quick tips that you can help know about it. Maybe not for this year, maybe for next year, maybe for this year. We will see. As always, if you're on watching us live, please drop comments in. We'll try to get to them and fit them into our schedule. I think there's quite a bit to cover and some interesting points at that, and we'll kind of go through as we go through. So thank you, Jack, again for coming in. It is a very busy time of year, and I think this is a very important topic. Especially we engage with these conversations quite a lot with our clients, especially when games are coming out and everyone's keen to jump on that Christmas rush. But I think these tips are hopefully going to be really useful. But to start off, the first tip, which is kind of a controversial one, but I think it's the most important one before we go into like the practical stuff, is something that we always speak about, and I know you always raise, especially with clients, is the question of, do you need to launch your game at Christmas? Which sounds counterintuitive. We're talking about Christmas launches, now we're immediately asking, do you need to launch them? But why is this such an important question to ask, and why is it such an important thing to consider?
well, I think as Alex may have said on Freemium Mode before, or possibly been mentioned on our Games PR podcast,
Good
we
plug.
can tell people millions of reasons why they shouldn't launch their game at any particular time of the year, but Christmas on paper feels like one of the most obvious ones people look at and go, ooh, Christmas equals attention. People are buying games. People might have new consoles, new computers, new mobile devices. So people see that as a sense of, hey, I can launch my game because there's a massive market there. But it's going to depend on every different person looking at that calendar and different needs, whether it's a case of they need to get their money in before the year ends on quarterlies. We see quite frequently an end of year pile up because things get delayed. And if it needs to be out this year, then this is the last month you have left to do it. So the need can be quite a vague term that applies just as much to a one person indie team as it does a multi-million corporation. So really depends on a number of factors, which we're going to cover off as we talk through, as to whether you need, or maybe move that to should I launch. So that's something to keep in mind.
Interesting point about that, about should launching, and like you said, the quick pile up and such. And am I right in thinking we have seen examples where games have come out after Christmas into the new year, and they've had that bit more traction because there's been less visibility. There's been less games coming out. There's been a bit of a lull after Christmas, and that actually people are paying more attention because they're avoiding all that noise.
Yeah, when you look at calendars, and 2025 is going to be one example, January looks incredibly busy because the big titles that have not chosen to launch in November, which traditionally was the biggest market because you weren't running into Christmas, you were able to get on the Christmas lists of journalists writing about what to buy at Christmas, but also as someone who has a November birthday, so it was a great time of year to be right. All the new games are coming out. Still happens. Obviously, Call of Duty is a frequently a November release. Even the sports titles, EA's Madden and FIFA, now EAFC, of course, traditionally aimed for that September to November period. So in the lead up to Christmas, but not Christmas itself. So it's almost like you have September, October, November rush. Then there's meant to be a lull in December, and then it all starts again in January.
Yeah,
But
I suppose
that's the case.
I suppose everyone's just vying for people's attention, right? And it's that dynamic that can be hugely helpful. But if your game may have certain teething issues, especially if it might be your first game or on a new platform, it can often be quite dangerous almost to get something out there when you're not 100% confident that
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And something that we'll bring up later as well. There's different financial risks of launching at Christmas, because there's almost the expectation of a lot of people for Christmas sales, especially with Steam. So if you launch around the Christmas period, there's a chance that you're forced into launching with a discount that you might otherwise not wanted to have done, in order to compete with all the other games that are putting themselves on sale for the Christmas sale, which starts after Christmas has ended, and suddenly everything's on sale. And if your game is sticking out there with its higher than normal price point compared to everything else, then you're going to get passed over in favor of something else. So there's risks involved.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I didn't even consider that is obviously going to be an element that people are going to be keeping an eye on. And yeah, it's not the best of starts if you launch your game with a discount on day one. But obviously there are reasons why people might want to launch their game at Christmas, especially if there's like a topical association with the holiday season or going on. I know there's an example that we like throwing out there with is it I Am Jesus Christ, right?
Yes, the infamous, I think, is a fair way to describe it. I Am Jesus Christ, from the team at Simula M in Poland, who wear their Steam page badge called Blasphemous by Fox News with pride. They got in touch with us a few years ago, and they said, we want to raise awareness of the game. It's still in development. We have a nativity trailer, and so that was, if you're going to do that any time of year, it's the nativity time. So for them, it was really, really important that they used the time of year to their advantage, because that's what the whole message was. And so that made absolute sense. And as you say, if the game has reasons, then absolutely it's just the same as you see lots of games with summer themed events and launches. I think that's something to consider here as well. If your game has launched, that's one thing, but you can still utilize the holiday season to do events. And I think that's something that might become clear as we chat, is that a lot of games will launch and then be able to use the holiday season as a free month to do different things, rather than relying on it being a launch month.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think it can seem like we're starting off on a negative point here, that you don't launch it. The whole point is talking about launching your game at Christmas. But I think the point here is more about discussing and really thinking, is it going to be as impactful if we launch around here? And there are reasons which we're going to go on to about how to make that happen. But if you're coming to this and you're listening and you're thinking, right, less just over a month to go, let's get this train moving, maybe not be the best time now to think about it. But it's definitely something that, as you plan ahead, you can actually really capitalize on the Christmas period, right?
100%. Cool.
Awesome. So, well, let's crack on with the other tips then. But I think a really key point to kind of clarify at the start. So I think the first tip we always speak about is just planning. We always talk about planning. I think in the last one we had with Alex, we were talking about the need for planning. Most of the horror stories we came up with basically condensed down into they didn't plan things through. They didn't think things through enough. But very much, I think planning is a huge part. And what do you have to say on this? What are the especially around Christmas? What are some of the points that you would emphasize around this?
I think have a plan for what you want to achieve. As we are quite media focused, there needs to be a plan for how you get attention from the media, and be aware of when that might stop. because some companies will work through to Christmas Day onwards. Other publications might close a couple of weeks into December. So you need to have a plan of who do I want to reach and do I know when they stop, so I know when it's best to reach them. I think it was another example Alex may have mentioned in the last freemium mode, and it might have been a spoiler for this one. I have to go back and watch it, but I believe he gave the example of we were given a trailer that was we put out, and then the client said we need to make a late revision to this trailer. And because it was during the holiday period and very, very close to Christmas, we had to, and it was a real challenge, but something we were able to do. But because there were so fewer staff at these places, trying to get that trailer taken down and uploaded with the new one.
Yeah.
So have a plan. We've already talked about being prepared. If you have issues with your assets or something has changed, you need to work out, this is my contact at this publication, maybe. Do I have a backup in case they're not there?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's part of the planning process.
I think that's it's a really kind of key point as well. It's one thing to like, okay, being planned, like knowing your timeline, but also anticipating that there is going to be a slowdown, there is going to be a rush, and you're not always going to be able to get through as well. And on the one hand, it's fine, like these things happen and things can get resolved. It's just having your expectations there that it's not going to be as instantaneous as it might normally be at other points in the year. So if there are issues and there needs to be amends, like you were saying, then that's fine. But knowing that those changes are going to come in.
Yeah, and doesn't have to be a negative either. When we talk about what kind of media pieces you'd like, obviously this time of year, there's a lot more emphasis on listicles and list content. So if you're not looking for reviews, or you think maybe my game can't get a full review, but I know I can get on a list because it's relevant and I've done my research into who I want to talk to and get on that list and show why, then absolutely you can use this time of year because you know people are looking. Think about your target audience. For mobile especially, we're going to cover that later, as to there's a huge opportunities for mobile games in this time period, especially compared to the PC and console games. So if you are hoping to reach a certain target audience who are thinking slightly outside of games, perhaps lifestyle, or if you have a family friendly type game, a casual game that might not be appealing to games media, but if you have a real hook that might appeal to tech media or lifestyle journalists, people who don't normally cover games, again, if you fit that role, then you can try and explore that because they're looking for content just as much as other media are. So absolutely try and take advantage of that if you can.
That brings up an interesting element to this, is that this plan, obviously we talk about reviews and stuff being kind of the golden goose of what clients want, but I suppose when we're talking about these plans as well, it's not just pure media or the pure traditional games media. Like you said, it's about thinking about the other elements, because you've got potentially that barrier up against you of lack of availability, the journalists being very, very kind of occupied with other stuff, bigger game launches going out. So if you're a smaller studio, you might struggle to get that visibility. So it's about having like multiple channels that you're engaging with to kind of spread your bets, as it were. Is that like that?
And you say spread there. That's like a pun segue onto. I was just wanted to mention the Thanksgiving and Black Friday period before Christmas, because we've spoken to a few people recently about their plans, and they had planned to launch in that Thanksgiving week. And granted, they weren't American based, but it's such a huge holiday for arguably most people's number one market, America, that the entire country is off for at least 2 days at the end of the week. But a lot of people in that week are traveling from Monday, obviously Thanksgiving being on a Thursday. So the reason that a lot of people push their plans into December is because they need to leave that week out of the plan. So that's where, again, it's not always a negative to go into December, and there are lots of opportunities, because for most people, actually sticking to that plan of launching in Thanksgiving week is likely going to be a worst a worse idea than it is moving into December.
That's really interesting. I think that's something that we often engage with, right? Is that we're dealing with multiple different markets, and sometimes the time zones don't always line up. And when you're working in that dynamic, it can be quite challenging to really hammer home, especially if it's just completely outside. Like, you know, in the UK here, it kind of creeps up on us unless you're kind of somewhat affiliated or engaging with the US. It creeps up on us. Oh yeah, it's Thanksgiving, and that's going to have an impact on everything from a client call to kind of journalists that are in the market.
Yeah, and it's just something else I wanted to reference is that we're talking about the Christmas period from quite a Western perspective, but not every market is going to mark the holiday season in the same way. And again, it's why frequently mobile games take the most advantage of the holiday season, because they are typically based out of China, out of Korea, Japan, who will have a different style and approach to the holiday season than, again, US companies would, companies out of the UK. So if your plan is for North American market, might be different to a plan you have in place for a global launch or other regions. Just take a step back and think. It's always good to be checking the calendars on Google or whatever, your phone, just seeing the different holidays get marked, because everyone has holidays at different times of year, and Christmas just happens to be one that is quite important for the US market, if we're talking in generalities like that.
Yeah, and I think that's why we like this tip. Seems like a bit obvious, maybe, like, oh, you know, have a plan in place, but it's actually having a clear plan in place, right? Like it's about taking into all those considerations, because they almost just completely compounded when we get to this time of the year, right? Yeah. No, I think this ties nicely to one of our other tips, which I'm jumping ahead to because I think it kind of links. It's a nice segue. Is about knowing our audience and knowing the markets. Obviously, you've been speaking about US and Thanksgiving and East Asia and so forth, but I think let's dig into that a bit more, because I think this is often a huge sticking point in conversations, and being really conscious of it, I think, is one of the most important elements of coming up with that type of strategy to really capitalize on the period.
Yeah, I've referenced that the majority of these holiday season launches and stories are mobile focused. Something we touched on at the start. We're talking about launches, but again, not every news activation will be a launch. If your game has launched, but you've got an update coming, or you have a collaboration with something, that tends to be what we see a lot of in the holiday season. So things might not launch, but they are established and they are using this month to do something else. The reason there's a lot of different talk about why mobile games in particular versus others, I think it's from a practical standpoint. People are traveling to, maybe they're traveling back home, or they're taking a vacation. They don't have their typical consoles or PCs with them. We think about presents. People might get a new phone for Christmas, and that is instantly the fastest way you can then get a game on your device compared to having a gaming PC, or your new console is going to be on the phone. Hence my casual games, and perhaps, you know, your mum's got a new phone. Very different case study to, again, your typical gamer. So that's why companies might look at the December from a non-gaming marketing look and go, well, we can absolutely use this month. Everyone markets during Christmas. Everyone talks about the commercials on TV and which is the best one. It absolutely makes sense that from marketing, we should be taking the most out of December that we can. Whereas we've talked, perhaps there's risks from that from a gaming perspective. So again, it's not a given that the holiday season means you can't do anything with games. So think about your audience and your market. And if that is families, non-traditional gamers, it's a great time to try and take advantage of them. That sounds bad, but take advantage of them.
Take advantage, yeah. No, I
just naughty list.
I was just thinking, is there also an impact on the flip side? Like maybe if you're a US-based company and you're really trying to break into, say, an East Asian market where Christmas wouldn't necessarily be a strong time of the year, would you say that it's like flipping it on its head almost? Like maybe that's when there's usually a lull from Western games companies trying to communicate their games products, because they all take a bit of a step back at Christmas, and there's an opportunity there for you to maybe engage with East Asian markets like China and Japan and so forth, because obviously Christmas isn't as significant a date as it is in the West.
It's an interesting concept. What we've seen frequently now, the mobile market is the big gacha games that get established in Asia, then come to the West after. We struggle sometimes to see the Western games going over to the East and replicating that. So perhaps that is something we might see going forward, is if some of these larger mobile companies in the Western market have done their research and go, maybe there's opportunities that we're not taking advantage of. So as much as we talk about knowing the audience in the markets, the industry is constantly shifting. I'm not sure that anyone is ever gonna nail it 100%. So it might be an opportunity that's not been taken, kind of like a game of chicken. If people are worried about getting to media in advance for Christmas here, actually they might be missing out on working through December in a way that normally any other time of year would be absolutely fine. So interesting concept. I wish I had the answer. I think I could make a lot of money.
I think maybe we've just leaked something that could actually be really useful for people, but I do think it's an interesting one, especially when you think about operationally, just functionally. Like I think a point we were discussing before this was how even if post-Christmas like publications are running, they're not necessarily running in the same way that they are. There'll be a lower team, people might be working more remotely, they won't have access to things. Companies close.
That goes back to the plan. You can absolutely schedule things in advance, and media will do that. It's why we touched on the video. The video was scheduled because it was all cleared, and then it had to be changed. So we talk about some unknowns here. One of the best examples we have actually is if you go look at the Sensor Tower reports every month consistently in China, Love and Deep Space has been top of that list for just how insanely popular that game has become. The elevator pitch for that is difficult to describe, but basically you get put in the shoes of someone who gets to hang out and potentially romance one or as many as you'd like attractive men who in one update became an underwater kind of Poseidon sea god, and in another update was just, I think, normally a painter. Anyway, the point is that game has been making absolutely millions, and we did the announcement for that, and then there was a closed beta in the West that took place over the Christmas period. And the developers looked at and go, who is our target market? Mobile gamers. When are they most active? They picked the Christmas period, and clearly it worked. So again, this is the approach that mobile in particular can take advantage of, because there are examples of that success. And I think, again, we will see more and more beta tests using it as a limited window and then deciding maybe I'll go launch later in the year because I used that December as a period of testing.
It's interesting almost, because maybe that we're seeing a shift here, because obviously go back to when I was growing up and hopefully you were growing up. I hope we're not that too far apart in age. And like, the Christmas period would be where you get the new consoles, you get the new games, but I think that was very much in an offline world, really, or very, very early stage of online world, where you can't just download a game quickly. Like, you'd get the physical discs, you'd get the consoles and so forth. And so there was more value in the push around Christmas, because physical sales were even more higher and demanded, like, that made a good present, right? A box to give the console or the disc. Whereas, that's moved away, and maybe people still have that mindset of no, people want games consoles and games stuff at Christmas because that's what it was like years ago. So it's still continued on. But like you said, maybe because people are on their phones more, because they're more likely to get a mobile as a physical thing for Christmas rather than a new games console and stuff like that. And the shift is taking place, and it's taken time for developers and kind of the marketing side to catch up.
which again I think is why we see that almost sandwich approach of the pre Black Friday rush and everyone competing in that space, and then the December break, and then the January fill up because marketers go, well, everyone's got new consoles, people have got new PC rigs and new phones. That's why we're going to launch in the new year, because everyone's got new devices and they want things to play on them.
Yeah.
So I think, again, the December sits in a weird place between two very, very active windows. But as we've discussed, there are merits to make December active, just like the ones around it.
Yeah, and I think the example of Love and Deep Space is a really interesting one. Do you think there's something to do also with that, like you look on the Reddit and it's insane the amount of love people have for that game, very literally, the love they have for that game, and in terms of, do you think that kind of adds to the cut through during the period? If you're marketing something that's got a very strong community behind it, you're going to get that volume of it over something that's just naturally a bit more of a new entrant.
Yeah, and I think it can be a play for social media as well. If you have a launch, then you're trying to tie it in maybe to the holiday period. What can you do around socials to amplify that? If you've looked at your plan following these tips so far and go, okay, I can't launch in December, but I announced that I was going to launch in December a few months ago. You can use this time, use socials to push out that message of why you're delaying or what the roadmap looks like. Keeping people engaged and transparent is really important. Again, we've talked about even the biggest companies will delay their games quite often during this period. And a huge thing they need to do is be transparent and keep their players or potential players updated on what they're doing. So even if it's not a play of, I want someone to cover this as news, you still need to put something out there should someone go looking, just to make sure, oh, the game's still active. It's not come out yet, even though it says it would. You're looking like, where is it?
Yeah.
Just, if you've had to change your plan on the fly, just make it look like you know what you're doing. You made that change for a reason. Even if internally it's a mess and you're very, very worried, act like you know what you're doing. Present that. And that just makes people more comfortable, more confident in checking out your game during a new time of year, if it's not going to be this Christmas period.
I think that's a really key point, isn't it? Because we can sometimes forget, actually, especially if you're working on a game and that's your baby and that's all you've seen and done for however long, you can kind of forget that there's a huge amount of other games coming out all the time. And so if you're not keeping people up to date, and if people are expecting it to come out beginning of December and it's shifted to January, they might just completely forget about it altogether, because unless you tell them that, unless you provide that narrative, it just gets swallowed up in the broader noise of the industry, right?
Yeah, and that's why we've seen some games almost make a play for December, thinking, I think other games are going to delay, so I'm going to be the one that isn't delayed and release during this time period, and make a huge success of it. I think it was Stardew that I was thinking of, Stardew Valley. That I think initially launched in February, but they definitely did something around the December period. I believe I will need to check, but again, if you can take advantage of the season because you know that others aren't able to, then absolutely you should be doing that. It's I've already talked about a game of chicken, but it's that risk you can take if you are prepared, if you've got your plan, if you're confident in your build, knowing that like 10 other companies who are trying to launch in the same window are not, then there's no need to go jump into January just because they are. You can take advantage of that gap left in the holiday season, which is where journalists maybe start looking and go, I've got no games to cover.
Yeah.
Everyone's migrated to Blue Sky when this has been recorded. Who knows in the future if it's still around or what happened with that. But as part of the starter packs we were put together as a company, looking at different journalists, some members of the team here are seeing journalists and freelancers start saying, well, my reviews are finished for the year. I have like a month or a few weeks left that look freer than normal. So again, if journalists are looking at December as a kind of no-go zone, but they still need work, then you could be the one that fills that gap.
I think that ties back into having a plan, though, is also seeing those other channels and knowing the channels that, you might not see it if you're going through traditional emailing the journalist routes, but actually if you're noticing them on that new channel, such as Blue Sky, then you can actually take advantage of the fact that it's still a growing channel. Not everyone's going to be on it. Not every developer will see it's going on. So it pays to actually just have eyes on it for that close. And all what we're saying, I think, ties to our kind of fourth point on this is about leaving it to last minute, which is connected to the timelines. And you made me smile when speaking about like companies like trying to fill those gaps when they know no one is launching a game around that time. And I always feel really sorry for the people around, back in 2020 with Cyberpunk, because I just remember that obviously they changed their launch date, I think 3 or 4 times. And you saw, like, I think the first time it happened, a bunch of studios just delayed their game and shifted it around to actually avoid getting knocked up right next to Cyberpunk 2077. And then obviously as the delays kept on going, they couldn't change it again and again. And so it did have that like unfortunate knock-on effect. And equally leaving it to the last minute, that game came out, I think it was something like December 19th, December 20th. It was it felt very close to Christmas, I feel. And that's all obviously a bit of that's not even something we'd advise, would it? Like leaving it that close to Christmas.
No. Again, you have to present and if it's not real, an illusion of what you're doing. So leaving it to the last minute, absolutely on paper, definitely not. You can do your best. There are different things you can look at, whether that's like going onto Steam DB and looking at the calendar of games there and seeing what's launching and trying to pick out your window. Again, you can never plan for everything. There's always a chance that something happens on the day, which ironically might be last minute and destroy all your best laid plans. But you can only back yourself and give yourself a good shot by planning ahead and not leaving it till the last minute. I think it's interesting to maybe discuss what last minute means here, because we've talked about some media publications having a natural mid-December cutoff date, and then they all wrap up for the year, pun intended. Others might be working through the Christmas period into New Year, just ongoing because they can't schedule everything that far ahead. So goes back to what you want from this. If it's purely sales, then leaving it to the last minute isn't a great idea because you haven't had enough time to build up that interest. So perhaps you go, maybe I should, if I can, I'm in a position to delay it until January, February to give myself a little bit of time to start boosting that awareness that you're not going to be able to achieve by leaving it last minute.
And I guess it also depends on the type of activity you're doing, right? Because if say you're doing ads within a streaming service, for example, like that actually might play into your favor because people are going to be at home more during the Christmas period. They might be streaming something and watching something. And so actually an ad that is there, you're going to have more people with eyes on it versus, during a midweek.
Which, again, is mobile, very heavy. So if you're not a mobile game, but you're thinking, how can I get in on the action? You might want to invest where you can in some paid adverts on mobile, or we've seen people watching TikTok or shorts on YouTube. Then that might be the way is through that. Now, conversions can be difficult. We've heard stories of people who get great numbers on their sponsored content, but because it's on a mobile device, it doesn't easily convert to a PC platform on Steam. Even though there's a Steam app, it's how many people are using that versus knowing they can discover games on their phone without having to actually play games on the phone. So it's an interesting discussion, but I think you're right in that there's paid elements that can be taken advantage of, and in some cases can be left till the last minute. There's studies and numbers because it changes every year, but January tends to be a time that influencers are not, I don't like the word cheapest, but they're ad rates are the lowest, because a lot of people are looking for content. They're seeing advertisers not wanting to advertise in that early period as they look elsewhere in the year. So maybe that last minute is your advantage because people have ad space open that's not been used, or they have end of year budgets available and they're more willing to give you a cut price deal because they need to get that in before the year ends. So there's do's and don'ts, risks and rewards. I would say don't leave it to the last minute unless you have a plan or a good reason to leave it to the last minute, which we've touched on here with examples of why you can do that.
But I suppose it also connects to like the type of thing you're leaving to the last minute, and if it's an intentional leaving to the last minute, right? Like I think if you're thinking 23rd of December, I'm just going to drop my game launch down, I think that's probably not going to be the best thing. But if you have a strategic plan where you want this publication to run an article this close to Christmas because you know it has a cascade effect, or a sponsored ad to go live or something like that, doing certain social posts to really capitalize on a particular day, like I think it's also just looking beyond the pure media play, right? And seeing.
Yeah. And it's not going to apply to everyone watching, but again, they might be in a position where they have some very, very big news as part of their game that they maybe have to leave till last minute due to embargoes or sensitivity around it. Maybe it's an injection of funding, or maybe it's a collaboration with a brand or a celebrity and influencer. So that might be something that you're forced to leave until the last minute. That brings me back again to some mobile examples we had of a client teamed up with a big name anime, and I believe that happened over the holiday period, but it wasn't something they could announce, before. It was sensitive. There was lots of deals involved, so it was in that post Christmas to New Year period, because that's when it could only go out due to all the deals and contracts being signed. So sometimes you're forced to leave things to the last minute, but again, use your head, try and be sensible, weigh up the do's and don'ts and the risks and rewards.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a really good point there about when you're in a kind of relationship with third parties or various publishers, whoever it may be, and your hands are slightly tied because you have to rely on them to tell you when you're allowed to go, and you can't do anything until.
We've seen it a lot with console. We've got some developer friends who are constantly waiting for Sony to certify them for PlayStation, and their hands are absolutely tied until Sony gives them the go ahead. And that could be a Sony turnaround December 5th and go, right, you're ready, you can go now. And their plans might have had to change because of that. To reference mobile again, not something we see too frequently now, but it definitely used to be a thing where people would have to build their plans around Apple potentially featuring them on the App Store. We've had many a client or a prospect go, well, I'm waiting to hear back from Apple, or Apple say they're going to feature me, and then it's will Apple actually go through with that? Because that's what they're building the whole plan around, is that visibility, which, as we've discussed, if you have some kind of holiday themed event or game and Apple say, yeah, we're going to put you on the App Store because it's Christmas themed, or we have a list you can go in, you're going to have to leave it last minute, because it's when Apple say go that you can go, and they can at their whim decide when that is.
I think that's where you have to work with whoever you're working with on the outreach. I mean, this is maybe a plug for us, but whoever you're working with, it's about respecting that kind of, like, trying to think of what options are available to you. And great, if we have enough time, we can do a normal media play. If we don't, maybe we do this. If we can delay it, then let's delay it. But ultimately, if you are in that situation of having that uncertainty and having to wait until someone tells you to go, it's about thinking about all the different options available to you. So you almost have like a point of no return, and at least you can do something to mark those events, because you don't know when that event's going to happen. Definitely. So yeah, I think that's a really key point. And I think one thing that also comes to mind about leaving it to last minute goes back to something that you mentioned earlier about Call of Duty and stuff. And I think it's looking at those games who have kind of a reputation to be like Christmas hits, or at least had you know, going back to my childhood at least, you know, going back to like those type of games. And it's like when you look at them, they're mostly in November time, right? They're mostly at the end of the year, but there's still plenty of time between when they launch and when actually people have open up their Christmas presents. So actually having that realization that the long tail of these things can actually be a month before you see it, and starting in that sense of earliness. I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but would you say if someone came to you, you know, January and said, look, we want to launch something around Christmas, when should we start planning for outreach around here? When should we like start doing something to ensure that we're not last minute, to ensure that we're not going to kind of bump up against any of these things? Like, what would be the ideal date for us to kind of begin putting things out there?
Again, I think it's understanding what your goals are. If there are certain media publications, and typically people might go, well, I want IGN, and that seems to be the top of everyone's Christmas list is getting an IGN, which is obviously a lot harder than it is. So you know, planning, you could plan years in advance for your media campaign. I mean, you referenced Cyberpunk earlier, and to think about the amount of marketing in the build up to that, and then the game itself is at the end of it. It's the product ultimately that people decide to buy or write about. So you can do a year's worth of planning, but ultimately it's how good your game is. And I think the confidence in the build is important, whether you want to do you know, handing out review codes, trying to get media into a preview, or like I said with Love and Deep Space, maybe some kind of beta test. You have to be confident in your build, because if it's not, like we've said, over the holiday period, there might not be any time to retract that, to push those fixes and get to people and say, actually, you know, that build was bad, but I fixed it. So you could plan months in advance, but ultimately, if the game itself is not ready, that should be the thing you are most concerned with, is how good is the game. Because if that game launches day one and isn't good, it's going to take a long time to fix that. I mean, at the time of recording, we are a day after Microsoft Flight Simulator launching, which as of yesterday had about 2,000, 3,000 negative reviews on Steam because the game was so broken. And this is Microsoft. They have endless resources, but like anyone, starting with that negative 2,000 to get back to zero and upwards into a positive is going to take some time. So
it's really fascinating, and it's probably a subject for another freemium mode, but about that the long road to recovery after the negative reviews. I mean, No Man's Sky, what came out 2015, and I think that was last year maybe, just finally got like mostly positive reviews or something. So it's just very interesting when it's not an overnight thing, and it really does, and especially around Christmas as well, that you have that impact of people see it goes out, other stuff starts flooding it, they go away for the holidays, and then they completely forget about this game. The only sense of it, even if it's literally turned around within a couple of days, which some matches can do, it has just that long standing impact because it just gets lost.
And your reviews on Boxing Day, on that, when the Steam winter sale starts, the Steam Christmas sale is really important, because you could have launched your game months ago and it's sitting on good reviews, and then you put it on sale and people get notified on their phone. Steam sale starts, this game is on sale, it's on your wish list. Sirens in the background.
I was going to say,
get locked up for giving away secrets in marketing. The point is, Steam, they get notified it's on sale. Someone is then going to click on that, and they're going to see those negative reviews and go, well, even though it's on sale, I'm not going to touch it. So you could be in a good position to have, through the year, or maybe at the start of December, got your marketing right, your game is in a good position, it's got some good user reviews or some positive coverage, and then you can brag about that in time for the Steam sale. Then that's a great way of making use of that holiday period, of getting those sales in, because it's on a slightly discounted price. We talked about it at the top, that you might not want to launch into a period where everyone else is on sale. But similarly, if you think launching with a discount is going to be my best shot of getting people interested day one, then the winter period is a great time to do it, because sales are very, very frequent and people may have some more money with the holiday spending. They might be in a festive mood and want to treat themselves or be buying things for friends. So absolutely, it could be a great, not so much leaving it to the last minute, but tactically going on sale as part of that last minute. And then it's up to you how heavy a discount you want to put on that. But again, it's not holiday exactly, but we talked about the November period with Stalker launching. They put some of the older games and other games in the genre decided to go on sale as well, in the way of trying to get people to buy their product or get excited for the game by putting the older ones on sale. So if you're in a good position, perhaps you've established and you've released a few games in the past, in order to bring awareness for your latest game, you might want to discount your older ones as a way of going, hey, we've got a sale on as we celebrate the upcoming launch or celebrate the launch of our latest game. So that could be your way of timing it for Christmas.
Yeah. And I think that brings us to like the final kind of piece of advice here. And I think to wrap up so far, I think a lot of the stuff has been looking at kind of the negative side of it, but I think it's important too, because people can go in quite eyes closed on actually how challenging it can be around this time of the year. But like there is a huge amount of opportunity, and I think we want to like recapture some of that within that positive sense of like actually taking advantage of the season. Like you said, like if there is that kind of holiday cheer in people's minds, and you can capitalize on it by putting a sale on of like a previous game in the thing ahead of your launch, and doing that type of activity that gets people interested and excited because there's already that momentum of the year, then you could, and you'll get that kind of engagement as a positive uplift.
Absolutely. Positivity. If you want to launch in the holiday season, then sales, incentives, you can frame it as giving back to the community. There are things you could do even if you're not launching, but you want it to be part of your launch plans. You can do, I don't know, giveaways. You could do something where it's, like chat to the devs and do some kind of, call it like a fireside chat and really play into the holiday season. Again, know your audience. If it is on mobile, then whether it's, even if your game has launched, I have seen here in the UK, the Royal Mail app has said you can change the icons if you want and put a Christmassy icon on your app. Even if it's simple as that, just playing into the holiday season in some way just could get people talking. We talk about media making lists. Those could range from best holiday season bargains or things we want to see on the Steam winter sale to this is what you should buy a gamer who likes blah, blah, blah. Think about all the really, really rubbish gamer merch that you see
from
in
Homestead
shops. And like the really bad clothing or the knockoff controllers. Because we're talking a lot about games here, but we've referenced people buying new consoles for VR games. If we're speaking to any VR developers, it's an interesting time of year because there's a chance that somebody might wait for a Black Friday sale to pick up a VR game, which makes the next few weeks into Christmas a great time to launch your game because they have a shiny new headset and nothing to play on it. They might get one for Christmas. And again, that means if you have decided to launch in this holiday period and they are looking for games, you might be one of them. I think it's the next Alien. There's an Alien game launching on VR. And again, that's timed in the holiday season because they're looking at people and going, right, when should we launch our VR game? When people might be picking up shiny new headsets. So
no, I think that's so true. It's a really interesting point about like putting yourself in the mindset of non-gamers or people who think they know gamers and that type of element, because you are going to have that gift giving and it's probably going to come from people who aren't always going to be as plugged into what's going on, what the popular things are.
To reference Microsoft again, Xbox recently launched their marketing campaign, which I think is timed for the season, and it was all about this is an Xbox, and they're calling different devices Xboxes, which made me think of when, again, parents might go, oh, what's that on your Nintendo? And they want to describe it, they just don't know what it's called, or they forget. So it's a bit of a joke, but yeah, if you can break through to that audience who might not normally be into games, you have a very different playing field to work with than you do games and maybe games media, who are going to be shut down at a certain point for the year and not cover. Maybe you are a mobile dev and you have your mobile game and you're going to struggle to get into games media, but it's the perfect thing for these other publications who want tech stories, who want fun stories for the season, and otherwise don't have them. So take advantage of the season, take advantage of those different media segments, and take advantage of the sheer amount of different people out there who are looking for games. Maybe they don't know it yet.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really key point, that you can actually gain a bigger market share of different audiences that will still have that buying power and that still have the potential to actually engage with your product. And you need to have that different sense of perspective when it comes to Christmas, because those people are going to be more switched on, because the media you engage with, the pool just gets that tiny bit bigger. So absolutely, despite the challenges that come with Christmas, I think there's a huge amount of opportunity if you play it right and if you have the right strategy in place. Great. Well, we've come to the end of our hour, and I want to just say thank you so much. I know how busy it is as being on the kind of consumer side. So many new activities, so many announcements, which we're really excited to be being part of and supporting our clients in this. But it has been a busy one, and it's been a very good time though. But obviously, a hugely important topic for us to be engaging with and discussing as we come up to this. If you've been listening, whether it's live or whether it's kind of after this has been recorded in a post-recording session, do leave us any comments or thoughts you might have. If you are interested in seeing how we could help with your games PR around Christmas period, or indeed any other time of the year, do let us know, and we'd be more than happy to have a conversation with you. This is, I think, the penultimate freemium mode of the year. We'll have one more just before Christmas, which we'll squeeze in the next couple of weeks. So look forward and make sure you stay tuned for that. But in case you were wanting for anything else from us, well, we do have our daily newsletter, which receives to you in the inbox. If you go into our website, you can sign up for that. If every day is a bit too much, then by all means sign up to our weekly newsletter, which comes out every Friday via LinkedIn. The other thing that you can also catch up with on LinkedIn is our monthly trends research, which the next issue will be coming out in the next couple of weeks. As Jack referenced so astutely at the beginning, he and Tom run an amazing podcast. So do make sure to follow and listen to the latest episodes on that, and hear even more insight. Some amazing guests on speaking about all things game development and games PR. But until then, have a lovely rest of November. Enjoy Thanksgiving if you are celebrating, and we will catch you in the coming weeks with the final episode of the year of Freemium Mode. And finally, I want to say just thank you so much, Jack, for your time here and your insights. It's been super, super useful.
Thank you for having me. I've got to get my way onto Santa's nice list somehow. So
exactly. Thank you so much, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.